I'd love you to welcome Rachel Matthews from Colchester Council Watch.
Thank you, and good afternoon. That makes a nice change to walk into a room and not have to say good evening, and not have to stare at a load of po-faced councillors who really don't want me to be there. I can't see your facial expressions, so if you don't want me to be here, tough. It doesn't stop me at the council, and it's not going to stop me now.
Good for you.
Basically, what we're doing is, well, I ought to say who we are first, because after Rishi Sunak's speech the other day about groups of people that are storming the council, I'd like to make it very clear that is not us. We do not go in talking about Gaza and waving flags and all that type of stuff. We're basically a small group, 3 middle-aged women in cardigans to be precise, and a group of silver-haired seniors that come and support us. Most of our supporters are in their 60s and 70s, so storming isn't really what we do. It's more of a gentle shuffle into the town hall. Apart from that one time when we decided we're not going to be searched by security. We basically, I should start at the beginning perhaps. When we first went, we went along because someone had said they're thinking of making Colchester carless. Could a whole load go in and, you know, make them aware that that's not ideal? So we did, and you just, in those days, you could just walk straight into the council. It was fine. The next time we came in, we were met with full security, a search, and the police. They really don't like people, actual physical people, coming into the council. It gave them such a shock to see real live punters come in. So yes, we did accidentally scare them to death, in part because none of us had actually researched how you speak at a council. We didn't know you're meant to go in, put your name on a list, and they give you 3 minutes. So, of course, everyone piled in. They had to get the extra seats. They sat down, and everyone, as soon as they started their presentation, people started joining in and asking questions like, well, why are you doing that? And that really got them really quite worried. I was half an hour late, and by the time I arrived, the meeting had been completely called to a halt because they were trying to sort of calm everyone down. And they kept saying, you know, you can't speak. And everyone was, well, why not? And in the end, they said, well, 2 of you then can speak. And I just arrived, just taken my coat off, and I could see all this going on. I was thinking, you know when you get that feeling, it's you. I had that sort of, thankfully, I had the helpful voice in my head saying, Rachel, don't volunteer. You've only just arrived. You do not know what's going on. Under no circumstances are you to volunteer. And it was like, oh, good point, good point. So I started to relax and I sat down. And then the next second, there was 3 taps on the shoulder. Rachel, will you do it? It's like, don't worry about that, just get on there. And thankfully, there was one other person called Jimmy. And he started, we sat down, the meeting started. I thought, it's all right. By the time the meeting's finished, you'll have worked out what's going on and you'll have something constructive to say. And then the meeting started back up and the chairman looked at us and said, right, you've got 2 minutes each. We thought, what now? Oh dear, oh dear. So that's basically how it started. And I don't know if you've ever been to a council meeting, but council officers and councillors have this remarkable ability to put everyday words that you and I would recognise and have no problem understanding. They have the ability to put them together in a sentence that's completely and utterly meaningless. So I was sitting there hoping that one of them would give me a clue as to what on earth the subject matter was. And Jimmy was asking about, you know, what's DEFRA? Why are you getting funding from DEFRA? And I'm sitting there going, OK, I've been out of the country 10 years. Who are DEFRA? Is that the defence or is that agriculture? What would DEFRA have to do with bicycle lanes? And I'm sitting there going, oh, God, I have no idea. I really should have looked at the documents, and I didn't. So I was completely clueless. And this woman that was giving the word salad responses, I was like, come on, someone tell me what's going on. But I was sitting there, I had absolutely no idea, nothing. Well, apart from the helpful voice in my head going, I told you not to volunteer. Luckily, by the time I could feel Jimmy running out of things to say, and it was like, oh dear. But just at the point he'd stopped talking, someone passed me the tiniest post-it note I've ever seen in my life with 3 questions on. So I was able to read those questions. I put as much bluster as I could muster into asking them, and it was very ineffective, basically. But when the meeting continued, they basically got shot of us. Thank you so much for coming. Now get lost. Once we got to that point, the rest of the meeting was about the number of EVs that they were going to bring into Colchester with e-cargo bikes and, basically give people the reason they didn't need to be in a car because they've got all these lovely e-cargo bikes and electric bikes. And any of us that have been on alternative social media, because at that time we'd seen all the bicycle fires and all of the EVs going up. So I was like, oh, I wish I'd known they were doing that because I have a lot to say on EVs. In fact, last summer, you might have seen, if you're on Twitter, you might have seen a video doing the rounds of some woman in a council talking about the mining, the pollution, the child slave labour. Well, that was me, had slightly longer hair. I was also lecturing them, once you start, I can't remember if it's somebody on your channel or it might have been Jeff Buys Cars. Once you start on the EV route, they say, you do realise solar's bad and wind, and of course I got solar at home, so I was feeling dreadful over the lithium battery any form of mining, as we know, is awful, but lithium particularly bad because of the sulfuric acid content. So I didn't know that at the time, and just how bad every part of it. So I was feeling awful about the lithium battery that I'd got powering my office, and then even worse once I discovered about the solar panels. So we've basically gone along to our council informing them. We go to educate them because most of them aren't getting this information, and they're certainly not getting it from the council officers because we've written to them, so we know this for sure. We've got a 9-month email stream going backwards and forwards with them, trying to get answers. And basically, we've taken several routes with this. It's basically to educate the councillors because we're lucky in Colchester. We've got some really good, well-meaning councillors. They're just not getting the good information. So how can good people make good decisions without the right information? So that's what we do. We go in and educate them because the basic thought is that if they knew how bad all this stuff was, they wouldn't be doing it. Well, that was my naive thought. But of course, all the funding, every council is broke. So, they all need the money. And of course, they get these grants if they do certain things. So bicycle lanes are a big deal to them because they get their levelling up money or whatever else they get to put all these in, and they can make improvements in town. Basically, they have mucked Colchester up so badly, it's so congested, they're hoping if they stop the cars going around and put bicycle lanes in everywhere, we won't notice just how badly they've mucked the town up. So that's why the councillors are pro it, plus they're getting all this money and they love all their green credential boxes being ticked. So it's been quite a battle that I've had to go in more than once, as you're probably gathering now. And I'm very popular every time I go in because I say things. I do the whole... Because they've got an anti-slavery policy on their website with the cobalt, which is in a lot of the e-bike things. I know they're doing batteries now that don't have it, but a lot of the stuff they have got has child slave labour, and it's on their website. They've got an anti-slavery policy. And I did ask them at full council one time, is that on your website just for decoration? Because you clearly aren't following it. But they just slither out of it. I mean, they have a legal obligation not to. And it's like, oh, well, it's in everything. There's nothing we can do about it. It's like, well, it's not in a standard push bike that we've all managed for, centuries. So that's what we do. We go in, and Karina, who's also in the audience, she goes in and gives them hell as well. Another lady called Cheryl who goes in whenever she can. And after we'd done this a little bit, because, my speeches they had a lot of gusto on the child slave labour and polluting the planet, something that, is a very passionate topic for me, but it's getting them to stop. And I would try to get them to take the moral high ground, and my speeches would fizzle off at the end with a bit of do the right thing. And it wasn't really very powerful. And then we had a group called the Peacekeepers, who, if you've not heard of them, they are a constitutional law group. And they came along, And they've really given the teeth to our speeches because they know all of the legislation and what the councillors are morally or obliged to do within their role. So Karina and I write our speeches and then we pass them over to lovely Lance, who just goes meow at the end of it with all of the things. He keeps them accountable within, you know, the fact that they are personally liable on certain things and, you know, just reminding them of their job and their duty. So they've been wonderfully helpful. What else was I going to say? Oh yes, net zero, that's the thing. And the conversation when we first met Brian and Lance, they were saying, you do realise you're like nibbling at the toes of this, don't you? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, each week you go in and you attack a certain thing. He said, Brian, his eyes spark. He's not sort of a very jovial guy. He's sort of big set, but he's always got a wicked little sparkle in his eyes. And he really lit up when he was telling me this. He said, the key to this is net zero. If you can cut the legs off of net zero, everything comes crashing down. So we've really focused our efforts on that. But the genius of what they gave to us, he said, you are trying to prove to them that what they're doing is wrong. He said, you've got that backwards. Do it the other way round. Ask for evidence. They've made the claim. They've declared a climate emergency. So that's what this, we've created a Dropbox folder that's on the Colchester Council Watch YouTube channel. And it's got all our speeches, all our research, all our freedom of information requests. It's got this email stream that if you want to bore yourself silly, although I did give it to a climate scientist and he said that he did laugh out loud with everything I'd written. And I started off really politely, but towards the end, it was like, after 9 months, I was like, I'm not interested in what you believe to be true. Will you please provide some evidence? And they just keep saying, oh, the IPCC said. And it's like, go on the IPCC website, CC website, see if you can find them declaring a climate emergency. They haven't. So why have you? And this is what we do the whole time, and they haven't. After 9 months, they've basically said we haven't looked at any dissenting information, so we've got that in writing. And then the last time I went to the full council, I mentioned about the dissenting information, and I said, will you please raise your hands, all of you who'd looked at this dissenting information before you voted for a climate emergency. And out of 51 councillors, only one was able to put his hand up.
Wow.
So we need to look at the legal implications of this. We might be able to go at them with the Localism Act because they are meant to look at things impartially. But before that, we'd been pushing for a climate emergency debate, and they had actually agreed in principle to that. So it's just pinning them down on the exact date. That is proving tricky. They're a little bit slippery on that front. So, yeah, we're getting there. And then at the scrutiny panel, I went in and said, have you scrutinised the decision this council took to declare a climate emergency? And they said, well, we haven't. But the chairman said, if I get voted back in again, my promise to you is that we will scrutinise it properly. And these meetings go on for 4 hours. So even if we don't get that net zero debate where we bring our experts in, proper climate scientists, and they can bring theirs in, even if we don't get that, we should be able to scrutinise it. And what has happened, one slight positive, although it might just be political shenanigans, the first time they voted for a climate emergency at Colchester, it was unanimous. They had one recently and 17 voted against it. Now, they were all on the blue team, and as I say, it could be just playing politics, but some of the reasons they stated is that the green technologies they're being asked to vote for are not green. And they said, unless you're looking at the entire life cycle of these technologies, we can't, in all good conscience, vote for this. So, we have made a little bit of inways. And what we've noticed is, by going along, is giving the councillors more courage to speak out. And that's what's important. They need our backing because they're in such a enclosed, controlled system that it's difficult for them. And then they're not getting, the public that do go in probably are pro all the green stuff and are saying they should have more bicycle lanes. So to have 30 people or so turn up, that's quite powerful. tying in with what Clive said, what you could do if you're going around to your neighbours is you could say, do you fancy coming to the council? We're going to go to some meetings, and what are they spending our money on? We need to hold them accountable. And other than the educational factor to help them, give them information that the council officers aren't giving them, we're shining a light on what they are doing. Certainly because the videos, some of them have gone quite viral. And last year I had the very stupid idea of setting up Colchester Council Watch YouTube channel, which basically is a highlights video of everything they've done in a meeting, and I put it into a highlights video. I thought it won't take long. Hit me, Richard, hit me. It's ridiculous. Getting the 4-hour meeting into 15 minutes is very tricky. But we were watching those meetings anyway, so we could glean what was going on, because none of us knew how councils operated. So, the important thing really is to stand up and do something. And it looks like I've gone over time, so I'll shut up now. But the main thing, I think, is people are too scared to speak out. And when you do, it gives other people confidence. And I think the bigger battle isn't with the elites or whoever the hell they are, I don't care. It's our internal one, that we've got to stand in our sovereignty. And if everybody did, but that act of doing what needs to be done strengthens us internally, and that, I think, is the biggest battle, the internal one, to get out and do it. Because as Matt said, this has happened on our watch. We've all been part of this. As you said, we've all been to supermarkets. It's time to stop that and reclaim our power. So one last thing I will leave you with is a tip that hopefully will be obvious, but never ever mess with middle-aged women in cardigans, especially if they're from Colchester. Thank you very much.